die Ideen und Diskussionen und Themen, die uns beschäftigen im Kongresszentrum, auch zugänglich zu machen für alle Interessierten, so wie Sie. Und jedes Jahr haben wir spannende Themen hier auf dieser Bühne diskutieren können. Das Thema des Open Forums dieses Jahres ist Gerechtigkeit für alle, eine Welt ohne Barrieren. Weil wir immer noch in einer Welt leben, in der Teile der Bevölkerung tagtäglich mit zahlreichen Hindernissen konfrontiert sind. Sei das im Zugang zu Bildung, zu Energie, zu Wasser, zu Technologie oder auch zu Gebäuden, wie dieses hier. Im Verlauf dieser Woche werden Sie viele spannende Themen hier erleben können, Themen, die für unsere Gesellschaft von großer Bedeutung sind. Deshalb werden wir versuchen, bei allen Panels, so wie hier, möglichst viele Perspektiven abbilden zu können. Sie werden auch Panelisten und Panelistinnen von allen Teilen der Welt hier sehen, aber uns ist es auch ein Anliegen, dass wir jedes Jahr auf jedem Panel auch Schweizer Stimmen haben. Schließlich sind ja die meisten von Ihnen hier sehr wahrscheinlich aus der Schweiz. Heute Abend beginnen wir mit einer Diskussion mit dem Titel "Alle Fähigkeiten sind willkommen". Wir wissen, dass etwa 1 Milliarde Menschen weltweit mit Behinderungen leben und in den Bereichen Bildung und Beschäftigung vor erheblichen Herausforderungen stehen. Um Chancengleichheit zu gewährleisten, müssen wir das Bildungssystem verbessern und wir müssen uns auch Gedanken machen, wie wir unsere Arbeitsplätze umgestalten. In diesem Sinne wünsche ich Ihnen einen ganz spannenden und inspirierenden Abend und ich hoffe, Sie kommen immer wieder zurück diese Woche für viele weitere interessante und spannende Diskussionen hier beim Open Forum. Besten Dank und schönen Abend.
Welcome, einen schönen guten Abend, auch von meiner Seite aus. Grüezi miteinander und einen schönen guten Abend. We're very happy to kind of be opening the World Economic Forum 2025 with a very important theme and some great guests that I will introduce to you in a minute. Let me just say we're very happy to be here and we're very proud and honored that there's not one seat available. So thank you very much for being here. We know that we run quite a, in a stiff competition. There's the inauguration of President Trump at the same time. There is David Beckham at the same time at the conference center. So we're very glad that you chose this panel to be with us here tonight. We can gladly say we beat President Trump and we beat David Beckham. Es freut mich sehr, auch auf Deutsch Sie zu begrüßen. Wir werden dieses Panel auf Deutsch und auf Englisch halten. Für all jene, die Übersetzung brauchen, for those who need translation, you've already seen it and you already wear it as well. There are some headphones, also wir haben Kopfhörer zur Verfügung. Und für die Diskussion später, also hier schon mal der Aufruf, bitte stellen Sie Fragen. Das können Sie entweder auf Englisch oder auf Deutsch tun. Wir können Sie diesbezüglich hoffentlich zufriedenstellen. Let me introduce you the panel and let me just start right from the start here on my left. Wir haben Islam Alicay hier. Wir sind sehr froh, ist er hier. Nationalrat aus dem Kanton Zürich, SP seit 2023 im Nationalrat. Islam ist nicht alleine hier, er hat Manon Christel bei sich. Und Manon hat mir eben ein wunderbares Wort gelernt, sie egalisiert das, was Islam Alicay sagt. Islam hat eine Zerebralparese, das bringt mit sich, dass er eine Sprechbehinderung hat und Manon wird für uns das egalisieren, was Islam uns sagt. Then we're very happy to have, I'll just go on in this order, Katie Talkowska here. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the Valuable 500, which is a global business partnership of, as the name says, 500 companies working together to end disability exclusion. And funny thing, an interesting thing, it's actually an organization that has its roots at the World Economic Forum. It has been launched here at Davos 2019. Welcome, Katie. Then we have Shanti Ragavan here. She's the founder of Enable India, an NGO that has impacted the livelihoods of people across 21 disability types in the whole of India. And she has been described by a newspaper as being a live wire. And we're happy to have that live wire here tonight. Shanti, welcome to you as well. And last but not least, we have David Edwards here. He's the General Secretary of Educational International, one of the biggest global unions with, I couldn't believe my eyes, over 32 million teachers and education support personnel in 178 countries. Since we're talking also about workplaces, since we're talking about universities, schools, it's very nice to have you here as well. Welcome to all of you. I was thinking, since we're talking about all abilities, welcome. We're talking about the state of inclusion, the state of how do people with disabilities cope with certain challenges, with certain problems. I would just like to start with asking all of you, from your different kind of perspectives, different kind of experiences as well, how would you rate the current state of where are people with disabilities? As we just saw, it's 1 in 7 people here on Earth. So maybe I can just start. So how do you see the state of people with disabilities here in Switzerland, maybe also in a broader sense?
Also vor allem in der Schweiz haben wir eine sehr spezielle Ausgangslage.
Also vor allem in der Schweiz haben wir eine sehr spezielle Ausgangslage.
Wir haben sehr viel Geld.
Wir haben sehr viel Geld.
Wir pumpen sehr viel Geld in das Behindertenwesen.
Wir pumpen sehr viel Geld in das Behindertenwesen.
Und wir haben auch sehr viele Menschen mit Behinderung, die zur Schule gehen können.
Wir haben auch sehr viele Menschen mit Behinderung, die zur Schule gehen können.
Aber wir haben keine inklusive Gesellschaft in der Schweiz.
Aber wir haben keine inklusive Gesellschaft in der Schweiz.
Dass ich Nationalrat werden konnte,
Dass ich Nationalrat werden konnte,
ist ja Zufall,
ist eher Zufall
dem Stimmvolk zu verdanken.
und dem Stimmvolk
Und
zu
nicht dem
verdanken
System.
und nicht dem
Und von
System.
daher müssen wir in der Schweiz noch sehr viele Sachen machen,
Von daher müssen wir in der Schweiz noch sehr viele Sachen machen,
damit wir eine inklusive Gesellschaft haben.
damit wir eine inklusive
Aber
Gesellschaft
wir
haben.
schaffen das,
Aber wir schaffen das,
wenn die Welt nicht komplett durchdreht.
nicht komplett durchdreht.
Wenn die Welt,
Wenn die Welt nicht komplett
Nicht
durchdreht.
komplett. Ja.
wir haben wahrscheinlich 6 Mal Zeit achten für eine inklusive Gesellschaft.
Wir haben auch eine sehr spannende Zeit.
Ja, eine sehr schmale Zeitachse.
Wir haben eine sehr schmale Zeitachse für eine inklusive Gesellschaft zu schaffen.
Weil je nachdem, was in der Welt passiert,
Weil je nachdem, was in der Welt passiert,
kippt das alles ins Negative.
kippt das alles ins
Und
Negative.
dann können wir Inklusion eigentlich auch vergessen.
Und dann können wir Inklusion eigentlich auch vergessen.
So there is a frail state, there is a frail situation, there is money, but we haven't achieved what we would like to achieve on behalf of the inclusion of people with disabilities. Katie, when we talk about money, you represent companies with money as well. How would you rate the current state?
I do. And also, if I may, just before answering that, I just wanted to say for anybody in the room with a vision impairment, someone who can't see me, I'm a white 50-year-old woman, and I have shoulder-length blonde brown hair, and today I'm rather morbidly in black, but I do have a flash of gold. So thank you. Yes, we work exclusively with the private sector because the private sector does have money, and we believe that it's the C-suite, it's the leaders who are in the driving seat of change. I think the reality is that a CEO in one boardroom meeting can make a decision in a matter of minutes, and that decision and that positive impact is something that perhaps governments or other stakeholders might take decades to do. So to answer specifically the question, I think, and I'm naturally an optimist, but the reality is the situation is still bleak. I think there is a critical disconnect between the global human situation of people with disabilities and the corporate picture. So statistics have been shared. We know that roughly 15% of the world's population live with a disability. Now, if you add in friends, family, loved ones, genuinely, and we're only talking about 3 or 4 family members, this gets to 70%. And I think the reality is the disabled community is all of us. Okay, becoming disabled, it's a group, a community that any of us can join at any time through illness, through age, through accident. So we have to stop talking about people with disabilities as other or different. It is a human reality. So in terms of that disconnect within the corporate sector, only 22% of companies globally even measure the data, look at workforce representation. And when you look at the data, you're looking on average at about 3% of people with disabilities employed within organizations. And that really, really has to change. The combined spending power globally of people with disabilities is 18.3 trillion US dollars. So for businesses to overlook people with disabilities is not only wrong, in my opinion, from a moral and a human perspective, it's wrong from a business perspective as well, because you are ignoring 1 in 5 of the global population who will buy your products, who will consume your services. So the situation is not where it should be, and I would say there is sadly a critical disconnect.
And there's a huge gap between those 3% and the 15%, and how can we tackle that gap? That's something we want to talk about tonight as well.
Yeah.
Shanti, when I heard Katie talk about how quickly someone can be affected by the topic and how quickly it can get very personal,
Yeah.
we're with your story as well, because you founded your organization also because one of your loved ones has been affected.
Yeah.
Your brother has become blind when he was 15.
Yeah.
And that has deeply affected your way of seeing and doing things in that regard. Maybe the same question to you. How do you see the state of?
So I'm going to actually talk from the experiences we've had with our work. And I'd like to say that from an innovations point of view, the world is doing really good. You know, there are pockets of innovation, and I want to talk about some of those innovations which have answered questions like, what will you pay somebody who cannot move any part of their body and needs to be bathed and fed? What will you pay them? Well, if you say it's going to be more than 2 times the per capita income, median income of India, you would be right. And the reason for that is the innovation was the behavioral innovation of working with company leaders to make them become includable. So includability quotient is something we've worked on over the last many years. And what that does is the company person is able to look past that difference. So when my brother, so just to become a little personal here, when my brother, stood first in his college, and he's a little smart ass also, so he goes to these interviews thinking he's going to ace it, and 17 interviews later, he did not get a job, and the reason is I feel for the athlete manager, because what happens is in their mind they're just saying, oh, he's blind, he's blind, he's blind. They're not able to go past that mountain. If they knew he's a brat, by the way, naughty, a joker, whatever, it's something they would be able to relate to him. So some of the innovations we worked on are, how do you actually build the includability quotient by which that manager is with this lady, right, who cannot move any part of her body, is able to give feedback saying, you did this really well as a project coordinator, but I think you need to improve here. It's very difficult to do it. You have to be able to normalize difference, push the strengths of this lady. And the solutions that we co-created, right, like using speech recognition, being really fast at it, these are the kind of things that have happened. So we've worked on workplace solutions. How does a person with cerebral palsy, Islam, you should know this, how the hands shake. How do you kind of work productively on the computer? Oh, it's simple. You have a joystick and an on-screen keyboard, whatever, right? So these innovations are doing really well. And because of that, 81% of persons with disability from the community that we've served are supporting their families, and 56% are the only bread earners, which is amazing. The problem is it's great, this innovation is great, but when you look at it from a population scale, we've impacted many lives, but when you want to impact population scale, that's when you have to look at it from a systems lens, and I can talk about that later. So there's a lot of work to do, and it will come through systems innovations. So I'd love to tackle that later.
May I just ask you? You work in India.
Yeah.
It's called Enable India. Is what you experience on a worldwide scale? Do you think are there any differences between India and other countries?
We have been called to so many places to talk about the work we do, because we've got people who are deaf and blind working in IT sector, in a tech job. So it's happened from developed countries, they've contacted us. The problem of normalizing differences, seeing past, being able to look at somebody's strengths, that's universal. With your kid, if they're not doing well in maths, what happens? We're like, why are you not good at maths? When you could be good at English, something else. So, doing appreciative inquiry, that is when you focus on strengths, when you focus on solutions for your problems, that's a universal problem. People don't do it. And that's our biggest thing we have realized. Includability is something that has to go out to the world.
I was that kid, by the way, who wasn't good at maths.
And
so I know how it feels. And look, I'm speaking English now.
Yeah, I like
there
it.
You go. David, I saw a number which struck me. In 2018, more than half of the world's children with disabilities never received any formal education. Now we're in 2025. How's the situation now? Is it better?
Well, I would love to tell you that it's better. We're about 5 years away from 2030, which is the deadline that the world's governments have set for themselves, and there are targets on the inclusion of children with disabilities in education. Only 50 countries actually collect the data. So the Global Education Monitoring Report of UNESCO, which is in charge of sort of following up on these indicators, can only get data. 2020, they did their report on inclusion and students with disabilities and teachers with disabilities. So we have a real big problem. We don't know. But we do know that in those 50 countries, if you are a student with a disability, you're 2.5 times more likely to be out of school than in school, than your colleague, right? So, and we have another issue, which is we have a global teacher shortage of about 44 million teachers worldwide. Okay, and that's not early childhood or vocational education, probably here in Switzerland, big issue, big area. That's just primary and secondary. And that's just to meet the 2030. And then on top of that, if you break it down and look at what are the areas inside of the teaching workforce that are most in demand and most and least represented, teachers who are able to work in special education, teachers that have gone through professional development, in working with populations with special needs are among the highest demand sector worldwide. So we have sort of a perfect storm. We have all these students that are out of school. We have a shortage of teachers to teach them. We have a funding gap according to UNESCO. I think I looked at it on the train on the way in. Most recent numbers, it's close to $1 trillion. It's about 890 billion annually, the funding gap for public education to get all kids in school and learning. So we have a huge challenge in front of us, but we have Shanti, you know, we have a lot of people that are out there raising attention and talking about. You were talking about the inquiry, the appreciative inquiry, and that is something teachers have. As a teacher myself, I remember when I taught actually in Bolivia after I was trained to teach in the U.S. And I won't say what subject, but you probably can guess from what the first sentence you heard me say. Deutsch. Ja, aber schon sehr lange aus, ja, und Oberösterreich, ja, dort habe ich Deutsch gelernt. But when I got to the school in Bolivia, I realized, because I was coming from the States where we had, you know, least restrictive, you know, environments, you have ramps mandated at the national level. But in Bolivia, I had a student in my kindergarten class that I was helping with, and that was on the 3rd floor of the building in a wheelchair. And what it meant was that all the students and teachers took turns carrying him up, all of those. So it took the entire village, and it took everybody realizing he has a right to education to start asking the questions, what would it take for us to get an elevator put in? Then who do we have to write to? How do we have to put pressure on the local government? How do we change the laws? And so you start to see that civic, you know, and I took that with me all the way up to the current job I have, which is, yes, there is not a lot of political will at the top, but there are some fantastic people who are doing lots of really important work, and they're asking really important questions. And particularly when it comes to where are we going to find all these people to be teachers? Well, maybe we haven't tapped into the right areas. Maybe there are people that haven't been asked, and we haven't created the right incentives and supports to get them in.
Exactly what Katie said.
So I think we need to look at it with new eyes. I still believe the rights-based approach is the right way to go. But I think if you get the economic argument built in, complementary to that. And I think that also if the labor side of it, right? So my members that have disabilities have their union that will stand with them to make sure that if they're on the screens, if they're seeing impaired, and during COVID, many of my members, you know, there was Julie from Scotland who was talking about going online and trying to look at a screen, but being a seeing impaired person, and that was right around the world, to make sure that they got the support and tools. It was their union that then helped them to make sure they got what they needed to be successful with their students. So it's a multi-pronged approach to this.
Let's speak awareness first, because I think before we start talking about what can be done, we need to acknowledge that, you know, we have to be aware of the issue and of the challenges. Islam, if I just ask you personally, you are now a member of the Swiss Parliament. You are doing a job, and you are doing a job which is probably more difficult because you have a wheelchair, for example. We just heard some some buildings aren't made to be helpful for you. Can you give us a kind of an idea of the many challenges you face every day on a day-to-day basis?
Meine Arbeit als National
Also meine Arbeit als Nationalrat
kann ich ohne meinen Assistenten gar nicht machen.
Wäre nicht möglich.
könnte ich ohne meine Assistentin Manu gar nicht machen.
Und zwar nicht wegen der Fähigkeit von mir,
Und zwar nicht wegen der Fähigkeiten von
sondern
mir,
wegen der Unfähigkeit des Systems.
sondern wegen der Unfähigkeit des Systems.
Aber es ist nicht vorgesehen,
Weil es ist nicht vorgesehen,
dass ein Mensch mit Behinderung wie ich
dass ein Mensch mit Behinderung wie ich
überhaupt im Nationalrat Platz nehmen kann.
überhaupt im Nationalratssaal Platz nehmen kann.
Und so muss ich quasi machen,
Und so muss ich quasi mit Manu
diese Barrieren überwinden,
diese Barrieren überwinden,
damit ich auf Augenhöhe
damit ich auf Augenhöhe
arbeiten kann.
arbeiten kann.
Und ich arbeite sehr gut als Nationalrat.
Und ich arbeite sehr gut als Nationalrat.
May I just ask, the feeling that that kind of sparks in you, is it disappointment? Is it anger? Is it kind of a disillusion? Or how can we read that?
Wütend ist bei mir ein Dauerzustand.
Wütend ist bei mir
Wirklich?
ein
Ja,
Dauerzustand.
aber ich fühle das gar nicht mehr.
Aber ich fühle das gar nicht mehr.
Es ist eine verlorene Zeit, wenn ich mich mit dem beschäftige.
Weil es ist für mich verlorene Zeit, wenn ich mich mit dem
Ich
beschäftige.
fokussiere mich lieber auf die Lösung und auf das Ziel.
Ich fokussiere mich lieber auf die Lösungen und auf das Ziel.
Und meine Ratskolleginnen
Und meine
müssen
Ratskolleginnen
verstehen,
müssen verstehen,
dass ich mit Assistenz arbeiten muss.
dass ich mit Assistenz arbeiten muss,
Und dass sie keine Angst haben, mit mir zu sprechen,
dass sie keine Angst haben müssen, mit mir zu sprechen,
weil ich undeutlich spreche.
weil ich undeutlich spreche.
That constant state of anger, maybe, that's maybe something that we have to address as well. Is that a good feeling also to maybe kind of, translate to all the others how difficult the challenges are? What do you think?
Is it okay?
Yeah, but whatever, whoever wants to. Yes.
So I think it's interesting when you talk about disability. A lot of my friends and colleagues who are disabled, they say it's not me who's disabled, it's the world that disables me. For those who are interested, it's referred to as the societal model of disability. And I think it is true. And the thing I would say is we know from talking to our companies, and Shanti, you spoke about the importance of innovation, okay? Innovation equals inclusion. If you're a tech company and you are innovating, you are naturally wanting to make your products and services accessible for everyone, to bring everyone in, to grow your customer base, as I was saying before. So I totally, forgive me, as a person who doesn't identify as living with a disability, I suppose I can understand, but I don't have that lived experience. But for me, the solution is simple, in that all organisations need to understand that if you innovate for a person with a disability, then you are making your products better for everyone. So again, it goes back to my point of not seeing people with disabilities as a problem or different or other, but as human beings. And whatever you do to make Islam's world easier, more accessible, less frustrating, so the anger doesn't come out, you will make the experience of all your employees, all your customers better. And actually, I find something really interesting and creative in that. The other point I would make is businesses need to stop thinking about accessibility and inclusion for people with disabilities as a compliance issue, a governance issue, a box tick. It's an exciting innovation opportunity. So again, I mentioned my inherent optimism, but I think it's the other side of the coin. Stop seeing it as a problem or something, to your point, Shanti, with your brother's experience of being fearful or, goodness me, I want to be a good person and I'd love to give this person a job, but they're visually impaired, so I can't possibly do it. Think about the creative opportunity and the unlock to accommodate and adjust. So yeah, I suppose simply put, I can understand how deeply frustrating it would be. But of course, the thing I would say about someone like you, Islam, of course, is people with disabilities, because of the frustration and the challenges they face, they are the best problem solvers. So bring people with disabilities into your organisation, because every day they are probably having to solve and face problems. So they're the original life hackers, the original innovators. So many, many positives.
I saw Islam nod to that.
Yeah.
Let me just ask the others before I come back to you. Islam, David, you were.
Can I just add, because she mentioned about innovations, we actually run a competition across 42 countries now. We're partnering with Zero Project in Vienna, And across 42 countries, persons with disability actually submit their innovations of what they do in their daily life, which they have done to solve their problems. We started this in India, about 3-4 years back, and it's caught fire and it's gone to 42 countries. And to give you an example, there's a boy in a small town, a small village, and because he's got intellectual disability and can't catch a pencil, they put a potato and could put the pencil inside that. And so he is able to write with that. And after writing for some time, slowly, they started peeling the potato, and now he's able to write on his own. Mm-hmm. That's the innovation. So these are the kind of things that come when you look at persons with disability and the lived experience.
That is striking what you say, that they're, again, that they're kind of born problem solvers, since they have to face challenges, right? Yeah. So how do we bring this across a little bit better?
I'm sorry, if you don't mind, or maybe after you.
No, go ahead.
I just want to say I look at it a little differently. I don't feel anger. I feel empathy to the disability on the other side. You're not able to see the ability of somebody. That's a big disability, So creating a level playing field for people who cannot see this is one of the most important things. And it's always a nice to have, and people don't want to do much about it. So we've started actually looking at it from an economic lens, like you've already heard the numbers, like $18 trillion. And we actually, started working with companies to show the dollar value. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we worked with a mobility aggregator and just told them to become purple aware. Just don't do much, just make your app a little accessible and just become aware of persons with disability, and we call it purple rides. And the driver just gets a message, oh, this is a purple ride. He gets a
purple being the color
of disability. Yeah. So he gets a 1-minute video while he's driving, and he realizes he just has to pack the wheelchair behind, go to where the person is, not expect the person to come. Very simple things. And because of this, the drivers being empathetic, we've had the driver revenue more than 500,000 euros just in a matter of a year. The average ticket size is just 0.5 euros. So we've shown that to the company, right? And companies that there is an economy around this. 200,000 drivers have got enabled because of this. 114,000 persons with disability have been using this. So there is a consumer base, and we've also kind of called this the purple economy. Purple again being the color for disability. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of what we want. When he mentioned, what did you say, 44 million jobs? Mm-hmm. Isn't that 44 million jobs that, governments always are seeing jobless growth now, and it's going away to artificial intelligence. Here's your antidote to AI right here. These many jobs available. Which government is listening? So we've got to be able to create that level playing field for people who don't see the value, who think this is the last thing to do. I'm really sorry to take a little bit more time, but I have to tell you something really funny. I had sciatica and I had to lie down for about 3 months. But immediately I had my solutions. I had this little snake kind of device. I had my mobile phone on it. I was lying down and doing my Zoom calls during COVID. I had my Bluetooth keyboard. I had a screen reader, which is used by blind folks. And I just wish the world could get these kind of solutions. Mm-hmm. We all need it. Mm-hmm. That's all. So sorry. Please go ahead.
I'm learning a lot.
David, now it's your turn.
I'm very happy. I'm very, very, very happy.
Let me just go back to that kind of,
yeah. No, but just like when he was saying about being angry.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the Marvel movies just for a second. And as he was saying it, I don't know if you remember in like one of the later Marvel movies, Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk, they're saying, "Oh, how did you get it under control?" And do you remember what he said? "I'm always angry." Right? But he did it as a human, and he controlled his anger. And I actually think that on the other side, it's not bad to be angry, because I'm angry about a lot of things in the world. If you look at it and you have any feeling, you should probably be angry, at least outraged on a lot of things, right? But I think that from social movements and the labor movement, where we find social change happens is when we get angry collectively together and we start to demand rights as rights holders, right? And so we start to organize, we start to demand those things. So we actually create the environment on the street, on the ground, so that politicians can say, hey, I'm getting clobbered by my constituency for this, right? The labor movement is demanding that we make these investments to make sure that young people in, I don't know, going through apprenticeships have absolutely all the tools, particularly those with disabilities, so that they can access the same markets. So I actually think that from the pushing side, on being angry and being vocal and you know, working with the social movement labor, at the same time to have people in the CEO suites, the C-suites, that are actually open and kind of working and finding those sort of partnerships where we can say this is an issue that we really need to advance together.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good point. Let's tackle this one before. So first learning, it can be good to be Hulk sometimes and be a little bit angry about these issues. And the second thing is, how do we engage people? How do we engage leaders? How do we engage these people in the C-suites? How do we engage the big companies as well? Islam, if I ask you the question, how do we approach these topics, and how can we engage the people who are in charge and the people who are also able to change things? How do we engage them?
Am einfachsten wäre es,
Wenn wir
Menschen mit Behinderung befähigen,
Menschen mit Behinderung befähigen,
selber die Verantwortlichen zu werden.
selber die Verantwortlichen zu werden.
Warum soll es kein UBS-Chef mit Behinderung geben?
Warum soll es keinen UBS-Chef mit Behinderung geben?
Was braucht es, damit das möglich ist?
Was braucht es, damit das möglich ist?
Das ist nicht keine Frage.
Das ist die Kernfrage.
Warum soll es kein Bundesrat mit Behinderung geben?
Warum soll es keinen Bundesrat mit Behinderung geben?
Warum ist es eine Barriere?
Warum ist das eine Barriere?
Und sobald wir selber in den Positionen kommen,
Und sobald wir selber in diese Positionen kommen,
können wir das System von innen aus ändern.
können wir das System von innen aus ändern.
Das ist meine Strategie.
Das ist meine Strategie.
Da bin ich auch Nationalrat geworden.
Und darum bin ich auch Nationalrat
Ich
geworden.
glaube, nur so
Weil ich glaube, nur so
können wir das System ändern.
können wir das System ändern.
Und zwar nachhaltig.
Und zwar nachhaltig.
By being visible as well.
Ja.
Genau.
That's very interesting. Okay, Katie, what do you think? I mean, what Islam says basically is we have to change the system from within. By being visible, by doing these jobs ourselves,
Yeah.
we can make people aware of it as well.
Yeah, 100%. So I have another statistic. I love my statistics. When we surveyed our companies and the C-suite leaders, the percentage we got back in terms of C-suite leaders, and actually we've now got 529 companies, but we won't change to valuable 529. I'd have to get new business cards printed. But when we surveyed them, 3% came back and said that they identified as living with a disability. Now, respectfully, and I do mean it, that simply is not true. Now, there are myriad reasons for that. I think there is a reality that there is a generational challenge. There can be cultural challenges within different geographies. And the reality is, for example, when I was growing up, no one really spoke about being neurodivergent. Perhaps someone spoke about being dyslexic. But now what we would understand as perhaps being ADHD or autistic was the naughty kid who couldn't concentrate or got bored easily. So I think the reality is the problem that you've got is there are not enough role models. Sorry, I'm like a teacher. I should put my pencil down. I'm so sorry. It's my passion. So there are not enough role models and there is not enough visibility. So this was the genesis of the Valuable 500, was to end the CEO silence on disability.
Are there also taboos or stigmata that people don't talk about?
Yeah, because I think, so there are a combination of issues. I think the reality is there's fear of stigma and discrimination. So if I come out and identify as a person with a disability, and obviously this tends to be a non-visible disability, will I be seen as less than? Will I be seen as other? Will I be pitied? So we have to overcome that stigma. And I think the cultural unlock of a leader within an organisation, standing up in front of the organisation and saying, I have lived disability experience. I am the carer to an autistic daughter. I have recently been diagnosed as ADHD. And you know what? that is probably the reason that they are the brilliant leader that they are, because they see the world differently. But we need more role models, we need more visibility, and we need C-suite leaders to come forward. And the last thing I would say, of course, is it is not a requisite to be a disability inclusive and a disability confident leader to live with a disability. I do not directly live with a disability, but over the last 5 years, from my family, I have a mother-in-law who is a wheelchair user. She has multiple sclerosis. My father has Alzheimer's. I have an autistic daughter, and I was diagnosed 2 years ago, and I have a nephew with ADHD. So over a relatively short period of time, my world has massively changed. So I don't directly live with a disability, but I am now understanding the world for people with disabilities. So you have to come forward and you have to talk about these things in role model. Sorry,
Islam is nodding vehemently. So yes, leading by example.
Yeah.
Bezüglich Role Models.
Bezüglich Role Models.
Ja.
Die wichtigste Eigenschaft eines Politikers
Die wichtigste Eigenschaft eines Politikers
ist das Sprechen.
ist das Sprechen.
Obwohl viele Politiker sprechen nur heiße Luft.
Obwohl viele Politiker sprechen nur heiße Luft.
Oh, there we have the first applause of the evening.
Und man hat sich nicht vorstellen können,
Und man hat sich nicht vorstellen können,
ein Mensch mit Sprechbehinderung
dass ein Mensch mit Sprechbehinderung
überhaupt sich
überhaupt sich wagt,
als national wählen zu lassen.
sich als Nationalrat wählen zu lassen.
Und jetzt bin ich national.
Und jetzt bin ich Nationalrat.
Jetzt wollen hunderte weitere Menschen mit Behinderung.
Und jetzt wollen hunderte weitere Menschen mit Behinderungen
Politikerinnen werden.
Ja.
Politikerinnen werden.
So you're the role model we're talking about.
Sie sehen das. Ja.
Ja, genau.
Sie sehen, okay, der Typ kann das.
Die sehen, okay, der Typ kann das.
Er kann das auch.
Ich kann das auch.
Why not?
Why not? You're right. You're right. When we talk about politics is one field, the other is business, which is a big one. When we talk about awareness and what companies can do, I was looking up tech firms, tech companies, which don't have that good of a reputation at the moment. But when we talk about these topics, they're probably leaders of the pack. When we talk about Google, Microsoft, Apple, I read, for example, Microsoft has made accessibility training mandatory for all employees. Would that be a solution? Is that the way to go? And how can we make other companies, maybe not as big companies as those, lead that that discussion as well? How can we do that?
What do you mean by lead the discussion?
I mean, what should companies do? What should firms do if they have that that question? Okay, how can we raise awareness for the topic, and how can we kind of train our people? Because a lot of people are simply not aware of it or don't know how to react.
I see it a little differently. The problem is when it's something you have to do for others, you will get to it one day. But when I'm telling you, how good is your people management? Are you the best communicator? If you want to be the best communicator, have a deaf person in your team. You'll know how clear you are in your communication. It's not because you'll have an interpreter or whatever, but you suddenly are, if you're a big talker, you want to put it simply across and you don't even know how to do it. Maybe you're writing, so you really feel disabled at that time. So when you tell your leader that, do you want to be a better leader? And actually, you know what, forget somebody else. Can you be more self-includable to yourself? Can you see yourself as a whole? Can you see your strengths? Can you see your solutions for your weakness? And then you'll come forward and say, I'm a neurodiverse leader. You know what I mean? You'll be authentic because it's, I've had meetings lying down because I don't see myself differently when I'm lying down when I was having that sciatica. Yeah. I had a meeting during that time with some senior officials. Why? I'm the same person. So authentic leadership, you're a package of strengths and solutions. You will push your own boundaries. So we've started looking at it from a leadership lens. when that person includes themselves with their ability and inability, each one, they would have gone through some struggle. They would have come from a small village and now they're a leader. See your journey. That's the same for a person with disability. So they're able to relate to it. So once you're self-includable, you'll do it with everybody.
Should having such a person with you maybe be mandatory? Should there be a quota to start with, maybe?
You know, they do this lovely thing in Valuable Finder, the reverse mentoring.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yes, how could you forget that? So, you know, you can start with just, yeah, you're going to have a mentor, and guess who's coming? Islam comes there. I'm angry. No. You know, but, you know, just getting that mentoring from somebody who's a good leader. So having leaders with disability at the table, and especially leaders who have a systems lens, I learned a lot from leaders at my organization. My deaf leader who runs the collective for deaf told me about the problem that happened in the 1800s with A.G. Bell. Before that, the deaf were allowed to sign. And sign language is natural. If you want water and you want to indicate to me, what will you do? Right? Everybody did that. Because it's natural. You don't have a voice, you use sign language. But A.G. Bell said, no sign language. And that's the history. Knowing that history, I know now, you know, how we can approach governments, what we can talk to them, right? I've got a leader with cerebral palsy. And, you know, you've got to have leaders who also have humor, like Islam has. And this leader who's running, you know, our collective with cerebral palsy leaders. So we're trying to grow more leadership. And I must tell you something interesting that happened. When she walks, she sometimes falls. And since our collectives are called like Here a Million for the Deaf, when she fell, I said, what is this? Am I supposed to call this a fall a million? And she just rises and says, Rise a Million. That's the collective's name. So don't you need these kind of folks at the table? Somebody who's going to be that way?
Yeah. So if I can add to that, you make a brilliant point about mentoring and leadership. So the program that Shanti's referring to, we refer to as Generation Valuable. And we refer to it as reciprocal mentoring. So it's the pairing within an organization of a C-suite leader who doesn't identify as living with a disability with middle management who does identify as living with a disability. And the name Generation Valuable relates to the fact that we are encouraging companies not just to recruit people with disabilities to tick a box and give them a job, but to show a clear career pathway and get them into those all-important leadership positions. Now, when we piloted the program year before last, so 2023, through the partnership of Verizon, we did it with 72 of our companies. And there was a huge unlock because even though our original priority ambition was to help the person with a disability get into those leadership positions, what happened, hence us talking about it as a reciprocal mentoring program, was the C-suite leaders understood for the first time what it was genuinely like to be a person with a disability within their organization. Because they were sitting there going, oh, we've got new accessibility initiatives, we've got programs, we're investing, isn't it great? Now, strategies and initiatives are fantastic. But as I believe Peter Drucker, a management consultant, said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If the culture is not right. And there was this cultural unlock. And we had 7 of our leaders who'd taken part think, maybe actually I'm neurodivergent. I didn't know about that. So through understanding and learning, they learned more about themselves. They understood the real life experience of people with disabilities within their organization and started to talk about it. And suddenly that cultural unlock meant that more people came forward, their workforce representation went up, they created more employee resource groups. And the last thing I'll say, Shanti, touching on what you said, is you were talking about the power of having a deaf person in your team as an example. You have to bring in the voices and the perspectives of the disabled consumer, disabled people, the people you want to represent and sell to from a business perspective. You shouldn't be ashamed of that. Every single stage of the process. The sort of clarion cry, the mantra of the disabled community is nothing about us without us. It's now rightly changing to nothing without us. Because as I said, it is all of us. It is a human reality. So bringing in the voice of the disabled consumer can be a massive cultural unlock.
And we should all talk about it to rephrase what you said.
Yeah.
This means this audience as well. So I would like to open up the question or open up the discussion in a minute or so. So please, if you have any questions, any comments, please go ahead. And well, I already see some raised hands, so let's start right away. I'll come to you right after, but the first hand was the lady in the second row. Please go ahead.
Thank you for brilliant discussion. I've got a question. Through my adult life, I've observed that we are moving forward, so we're making steps forward, probably not enough to catch up what was missed in the previous years, but that was a progress. And now many tech companies, which are I saw two of them on Promenade today, they are pulling off the diversity and inclusion programs, which is obviously a step back for me. Mm-hmm. So would you see any reasons why is it happening? Like we didn't achieve like anything that that progress that we need to stop. So what are the reasons for that, and what we as people, as community can do to prevent it from happening in the other companies as well?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Who would like to?
I can answer, but I'm conscious I've spoken a lot, so I don't know if anybody else. Shall I be brief?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, so I think. So again, me as the optimist, that there is no doubt that there are challenges ahead. I don't wish to get political, but today is, thank you for joining us and not being at the inauguration or seeing David Beckham, but today is quite a poignant day. And we mustn't be too US-centric, but there is no doubt that there are negative wins. There's a lot of talk about the anti-woke movement. Now, I think it is important that organisations double down internally on their efforts. And when we talk to our valuable 500 companies, I'm going to give you an example of Walmart, for example. Walmart have publicly, as you rightly said, gone out and said we are deprioritising diversity and inclusion and equity. Now, I deal with a fabulous gentleman called Victor Calise, who's their Chief Accessibility Officer. And I spoke to him when I'd seen the article, said, this worries me. And he said, Katie, don't worry. We are not changing anything. We're not cutting off our budgets. We are not deprioritising anything that we are doing. We are just talking about it differently. Because if you put your head above the parapet and you talk about diversity, for example, the people who are pro the anti-woke movement will have an allergic reaction to diversity. They'll say, well, why should we be more diverse? I'm happy being the person that I am, looking how I am. I don't want difference because I like the status quo. But if you reframe it and you talk about people and you talk about humans and you say, should we hire people and give everybody an opportunity? Do we want problem solvers? Do we want people who come at things differently so that we have a rich, interesting, more inclusive workforce? Then people go, yeah. And you go, bring people in, they'll be more productive. Your business will grow. So talking to some of the companies who have had to go, who've gone out publicly to say, we're not going to talk about our diversity and inclusion initiatives, they're not necessarily changing what they're doing on the inside, but they're finding new language to get around it. Now, I admit that's one example I'm giving you, and some unfortunately will probably cut budgets off. But for those of us who are fighting, it gives me more anger, it gives me more passion, and I still think there is hope. But I think we need to reframe things differently, and never more has the human angle been more important. So.
David, yeah.
I think, someone's being inaugurated today who was famous in my country. I am also a Belgian citizen as well as an American, but I was born in the US, who became very well known for mocking journalists openly with disabilities. So that's where we are. So that role model is not there currently. It's not a compassionate role model. So for those in sort of the business world in Davos who purport to have values, it's really important right now for everyone to speak up and to talk about the fact that you do want to have an inclusive workforce, you do want to have a diverse workforce, that diversity does add strength. Now, Kate, better than I do in terms of how you organize that and how you use the discourse, appropriately. Discourse isn't really my thing. I'm more of a teacher, organizer. So mine is much more in terms of just go and do. But I think that it's going to be leadership. It's going to be political leadership. It's going to be business leadership. It's going to be civil society leadership. It is going to be trying to find those other polar opposites and giving them and building alliances with them. I was just thinking about my friend who was the Minister of Education of Argentina, Esteban Bullrich. I don't know if any Argentines are here, but Esteban has ALS, and while he was a senator, he was also the main senator in the Argentina. He lost the ability to speak. Yeah? And a lot of people were telling him, now you just need to go and disappear. But instead of doing that, you know, he ran the marathon, the Buenos Aires Marathon. He's an outspoken, and he gets the best technology and the best AI. And his main thing, and he writes about it, is, I want this for everybody. Yeah. So the Prime Minister of Sierra Leone, over 10 years, the First Minister, David Senke, who's watching, he texted me to say, I better, you know, because this is the one thing, he thinks that this is probably the most important conversation at Davos, right? So because he wrote a book called Radical Inclusion, and he became Minister of Education and then Prime Minister at a time when girls who were pregnant couldn't go to school, right? And he said no, and he built alliances, and they changed the laws. It was the first in that region to do that, but he didn't stop there. Then it was about other areas of access. These are the stories we have to tell. These are the people we have to hold up, not just because they can have a return or just because, you know, they can scream and because they're the tallest, because they're the blondest or whatever. This is, I think, a moment for humanity to really dig in and decide who we are and what leadership means. So
Again, leading by good example.
Yeah.
And we had a gentleman in the first row for the next question. The microphone right here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's a great opportunity to be here in Davos. Myself, Manik Shaw. And I understand that to bring this drive, the public sector, private sector, civil society, at the same time, non-profits are really putting their best efforts. But to drive this kind of agenda, we see there are a lot of challenges. There's some challenges. Shanti spoke about the revenue lines, economic growth, the whole framework. And Katie also talked about a lot of value-driven companies. So, I understand this private sector got to really play a real contribution into it. Of course, from encouraging these corporates, at the same time, how to really navigate those bottlenecks. So, how do you encourage, Katie, this whole, value-driven companies so that they can genuinely put their contributions and not to really, ticking the box, but to genuinely have this goal to be really driven from everyone within. So would like to understand your perspective on that.
How to walk the walk in a nutshell.
So I suppose one of the benefits of being a big collective, and when you look at the total workforce across the valuable 500 companies, it's about 24 million employees. So I know people talk a lot about collaboration, etc., but for us, the way we work together with our companies to really drive system change is we talk about taking synchronized collective action. And all three of those words are really important, but if I were to choose one, probably it would be synchronized. Because if you think about the power and the might of these companies, okay, who I said 24 million employees, they have a combined market cap, more statistics, forgive me, of 28 trillion US dollars. If collectively we can get them to work together to address the same problem at the same time, in the same way, that's when we're going to see real system change. And I suppose that rising tide philosophy. So I think never has the power of the collective been more important, because we're in a fortunate position and all the companies that have made a commitment, they are in their own right, progressing. It is very much a journey, and all our companies are at different levels. But by learning from each other, learning from each other's successes, also learning from each other's failures, you can really accelerate that education, that awareness. And, as an example, we, at the end of last year in London, we held a gathering with our iconic companies. They're our most engaged companies, of which we have 17. And it was brilliant because we had companies in the room who ordinarily compete tooth and nail. We had Deloitte in the room, we had EY in the room, we had Apple, we had Google, we had Microsoft. I was thinking there was going to be, I was a bit disappointed that there was no sort of fisticuffs. But actually, when they were all in the room, they realised that the reason that they were there to end disability exclusion was bigger than their day jobs. So it was almost pre-competitive. But they also knew, to my other point, that if they listened and they learnt from each other, then maybe they would go back to the ranch in their industry vertical and have that competitive advantage. So it was beautiful to see that working together and that collaboration. Sorry.
Can I just take that topic and maybe throw it over to Islam? Because now we're talking about business, now we're talking about companies. Who should actually be in the driver's seat? Because, you know, the businesses are not the lawmakers. I mean, it has to come from not only from the private sector, but also from the public sector. What's the role of governments, of politics, of the you know, your side of the discussion?
Wir müssen uns bewusst werden, dass die Privatwirtschaft alleine
nicht eine inklusive Gesellschaft bauen kann.
nicht eine inklusive Gesellschaft bauen kann.
Die Politik muss